Ron. Good morning, everybody. My name is Terry, and I am an alcoholic. And I'm so grateful to be here, sober, and still alive. I forgot all about that story. And that was a foxhole prayer. But I haven't done this in about 3 years, so just bear with me and we'll get through this. I wanted to open by saying thanks, for everybody being here. And I wanted to say a special note to anybody, that's new coming around, that's just coming around. There's 100 things I could tell you, 100 reasons why you should be here, but this is the nuts. This is the way to live. I understand if you're real new, you're probably still craving to drink, and it gets better. I guarantee you, it is going to get better if you hang in there. And just keep it simple. That's what I had to do when I came around. I had to keep it simple. Just go to meetings, ask God for help, and don't pick up the first drink. You're real important to me. Well, you're all important to me, but the guy that's just coming around with, with alligators still snapping in his butt, I know how you feel. And the only reason I know is by going to meetings, because I forget easy. I got a terrible memory. And I'm fortunate enough to have, been sober since 1986, so I definitely would have forgotten that if it hadn't have been for meetings and if it hadn't have been for listening to people just coming in and listening to other alcoholics tell me how miserable it was and reminded me. And I never want to go back there. I never want to be miserable again. What we're supposed to do is tell what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, which I'm going to attempt to do. I had a pretty good kid life. I did grow up in an alcoholic family. My dad was an alcoholic, and there was chaos. There was a lot of fighting, a lot of yelling, a lot of door slamming. But at least now, maybe not before I got sober, but at least now I see a lot of good things too. Maybe this disease is hereditary, very possible, because I've got a couple of adult, kids that are adults now that I think could have a problem. Maybe it's because I have to go to jail every once in a while and bail them out and stuff like that. And same stuff I did, and the same stuff that my dad did, and I swore I'd never do. I swore I ain't never gonna be like that. I'm never gonna be to the point where my kids aren't able to bring their friends to the house, which there were a lot of times I couldn't because he'd be in bad shape and my mom'd be mad, so she'd be yelling and screaming, and I always blamed her. I said, geez, I drink too, with all that yelling and screaming. Little did I know she had a lot of reason to yell and scream. But I swore I wouldn't do it. But we know the story behind that. I guess, I don't know why it is, but 13 years old, I think 80% of the stories I hear, everybody started drinking at 13. I often wondered why that was at the magic age. But I think it was about 13 and when I had my first drunk. And as much, even with all the trouble that I got in, because I got in a lot of trouble because I got caught, but I still liked it. I loved that numbness and the way it made me feel. I had to be brought home, and my buddies put me up against the door, and one of them turned the doorknob, and I fell in right on my face, and my mom and dad were there. My mother was screaming and hollering, "Oh my God, he's dead!" And my dad just stood there. He knew, I was drunk. And so I was terrible sick, and I went to bed, and I got up the next morning, and I knew I was in trouble, So my mom the next morning I had the Inquisition. I wanted to know what happened, why would you do this? I was the altar boy. I was the guy that was going to go to the seminary and be a priest. And, out of 6 of us, I was her big hope. And she couldn't understand it. So I didn't want to break her heart. Plus, I didn't want to get in trouble. So I says, I was going over to Miles Gibbons. He was a friend of mine that lived a few blocks away. And I says, I was going through the alleys and the prairie and that to go to Miles. And these 3 guys jumped me. And they had a bottle of whiskey and they made me drink it. I said, I really fought and they had 2 guys held me down as if I needed 2 guys to hold me down. And one guy poured it down me and, I tried for a couple hours to get sober and we just couldn't do it. So I had my buddies drop me off. And I'm sure she was playing, she says, okay. She says, in that case, we need to call the police. And all this time, my dad is holding the refrigerator up, listening to this stuff. And, then I got scared. Call the police. Definitely afraid of police. Still am. Oh, geez. So I said, I finally fessed up. I says, I'm lying. I said, so I think the biggest punishment I probably got grounded. My big brother, my brother Tommy, ended up following me for a month. This poor guy, he had to, wherever I went, I showed up, I'd look over, I'd be in the park playing baseball, he'd be over there wherever I was. Here's a guy that I think he drinks half a shot of brandy once a year, and he spent half of his young life and a good portion of his adult life looking after me because of my drinking, which I'll touch back to that later about my brother. But anyway, that was my first drunk. As I said before, I did love the feeling, so that it probably explains why whenever I could, I would party, I would drink. And at that time when you're in high school, we'd do it on the weekends, Friday, Saturday night, and we'd get a bum on the street, and he would buy us the booze, and I would walk around the block. I would get 2 quarts of, I think it was Blatz or whatever, it doesn't matter, but I would walk around the block and I'd drink them as fast as I could before I got back to where all the kids were hanging out, so by the time I got back, I would be good and primed up, and I would be popular then. I could talk, I could come out of myself, and so that's what I did, and I don't know if I got in a whole heck of a lot of serious trouble during high school. There were incidents, but I can't tell you that all my drinking was miserable, especially in the beginning. In the beginning, I loved it, and I think I spent up until I was 38, 39 years old trying to find that again. And I never found it that good again. It just got increasingly worse, and so did the troubles. I finished high school, and then I went in the Army, and that was great. The night before that I went in the Army, I started drinking at 11 o'clock in the morning. I got drafted, by the way, and they had a party for me that day. And so I started drinking at 11 in the morning. We used to drink Southern Comfort. We get it in a little flask and put it in our back pocket, and I drink all day. And I was still on my feet, till that night. And that night I got together with my older sister and her to-be husband later, and he was a bit of a drinker, and he took me to this bar. And I looked like I was about 15 years old, and somehow he got me into this bar, and he fed me like a couple of Manhattans, and I don't remember anymore. I just remember the next morning I was at the induction center to go in the Army, and I woke up, and my friend from school, high school and grade school, was filling out all my stuff. That's how drunk I was, and that's the first thing I remember. And we took a train down to Fort Campbell, Kentucky from Chicago, and I stayed sick, I think, for at least a couple days, and I remember getting off that train and the DI kicking me, screaming, and oh my God, I was so sick, and he's screaming, and they're pushing us around and making us stand in line and that, and there had been a lot of trouble that night, you know, when I was drinking in the bar. I could remember flashbacks of screaming and hollering, and a friend of my brother-in-law's going through the window and bleeding, and it was only, I didn't know the whole story. I could just remember these terrible things. You think right there that would have been enough for me to realize that, you know, this drinking is serious business, you know, and it's not all good times. But anyway, I went in the Army. I went to Vietnam, and in a way this was neat because drinking was legal. They would issue you booze and beer, you know, and I think I felt like we were expected to drink, you know. The more we drink, the drunker we got, the more men we were or something. And I must have been a hell of a man because I'd done a lot of drinking. I don't know if some of you have probably heard about, I won't go real deep into it, but the Tet Offensive during the Vietnam War. I was based in a city in a pretty much a garrison. I had never seen the enemy or nothing. And December 31st in 1967, Tet Offensive, that's when they came from everywhere. They came in the cities. Well, that night, they hit at 3 in the morning, and I closed the NCO club at 2. And I was just drunk as usual, actually. And I slept on the top bunk, and we were on alert, but still, I passed out on the bunk. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, a hand grenade came into the compound, and if you ever want to get sober fast, have somebody throw a hand grenade outside your window. That was better than any aspirin, black coffee, or anything else I ever had. And well, I lived through that, and you often hear about foxhole prayers, and I came up with a bunch of them for the next 3 days. I was due to go home, and when we got hit, I only had 3. I had been in country for a year, and I had 2 or 3 days left to go, and I just wanted to go home, and I kept, God, please, I'll never drink again. I'm never going to swear again. I'll stop smoking, forgive women, and I will be a priest when I get home. Just get me out of here, you know. He got me out of there, and I think I broke, well, probably a good third or a half of the promises by the time we reached San Francisco on the plane. And I did a lot of that throughout my drinking and throughout my life. And if I don't watch it real quick, I can even do it today. You know, ask God for things, and I ask Him for getting me out of jams that I put myself in. So I didn't know about foxhole prayers today till I came into this program, by the way. But anyway, I went through the Army. I ended up in Germany too. I ended up re-enlisting for a year and got married somewhere in there towards the end. Which the marriage was, like most are, it was great at first. We had 6 children. We had 5 boys and a little girl, and things were you know, pretty normal for a family of 6. And I had a real good job. I started working at Chicago Transit Authority when I was 18 prior to going in the Army. When I came back, I kept my seniority in that, so I went back there. So I made good enough money to raise 6 kids, and you know, and that was the number one thing in my life was to take care of the kids and take care of my obligations, which I thought that I did pretty good, and I probably did for the most part, because my drinking for 12, 14, 15 years in the marriage, it was like in spurts. I could go 3 months without drinking, but every time I drank, I got drunk. I just didn't understand just having, because I wasn't all that nuts about the taste of booze, but I did love that numbness still. You know, I liked that feeling numb and relaxed. So I figured if it made me numb and relaxed 2 or 3 of them, then 10 or 15 should make me feel better. And you know, how could I not know from experience that just, you know, the 10 or 15 always gets me in deep trouble. So anyway, I went about my life, and along with these drunks every couple of months, and about in the early 1980s, my in-laws opened up a tavern about a block away from the house. And so at this time, my oldest boy was old enough to babysit for the other ones. So my wife at the time and I started going to the tavern, her brother's tavern and that. And at first it was a lot of fun and that. And it got to the point where it was every night. And most of the time it was both of us. And it got real ugly real fast. The drunks got bad, and then, both of us. And fighting in the marriage, the marriage pretty went real bad after that. And to make a long story short, about 1984, I got a divorce. I left, and anyway, well, prior to that, though, I've skipped some things. Along with these drunks that I spoke about, every couple of months. Some of the best ones, or worst ones, were I ended up in a psych ward in one of the big hospitals in Chicago, and I had been seeing the psychiatrist, and he would tell me, he'd say, "You're not a drunk, you're just married to you're just married to a witch. It's not your fault." He said, "Just don't drink as much." Well, I seen him for a couple of years, and I ended up in this in the nut house, and nobody ever mentioned the fact that I was drinking. The fact that I was drunk the night or the day that I was put in there, and they had come in the house and broke windows, and I had one of the kids was still in a bassinet, and I kicked that over, and the kid went flying, and I had been drinking for 12 hours, and then I ended up in this psych ward, and nobody ever mentioned that booze had something to do with this, which was great, great. I guess I ain't an alcoholic. Even this psychiatrist never mentioned booze, but I found out later booze had a little to do with it. But anyway, and then also prior to leaving, I ended up in jail for domestic violence. I don't even know if they called it that then, but I told my wife at the time, I told her I'd like to strangle her. I didn't strangle her, but all I had to say is I'd like to, and I ended up in jail. And that was one of my biggest fears. That was right up there with drowning or burning, or, I just was so scared to go to jail. And I was scared of Bubba in there and everybody else. So luckily when they brought me in, I knew the jailkeeper. He was the guard at the bank. So he took one look at me and he shook his head and he put me in a cell by myself. To this day, I thank that guy because there was a lot of Bubbas in the next cell, just licking their chops. So I'm really glad that I knew that guy. But needless to say, it was a disaster. Booze having a lot to do with it. So I leave home. I go in the process again, my divorce, and I go live with my poor mother, who was put up with this crap all her life. And I go there, and I live. My dad's gone, by the way. My dad had died prior to me getting out of the army. So I move in with her, and I would take, and especially on the weekends, I would buy about 2 cases of beer, and I stayed upstairs, and I had a little room, and I put the beer in the room at the bottom of the bed, and I figured, well, I'm safe here for the weekend. And I didn't even cool it. It was warm beer. I didn't care. And I had a TV and one easy chair, and that's what I would do. I would sit there and drink. And drink, get sick, go to sleep, and drink, get sick, go to sleep, and then I went to work Monday. But then I started going out. One of my buddies at work, I started meeting him. And it got to be a real regular thing, and it got real bad, and I got to the point where it was affecting my mother. And I would be missing. I'd be due home at noon because I worked nights, and it'd be 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and I wasn't home. Well, I was at the tavern. So she'd send my brother, who I had spoke of earlier, Tommy. Poor Tommy had come looking at all the taverns he thought I might be. And he hated taverns. He hated going in there. And he'd come in and I'd go, come on, Tom, have a drink. You know, Tommy didn't drink. He didn't want to drink. Come on, you got to go home. And this poor guy, he pulled me out of there. And I'd get sober enough to go to work that night. I was a foreman, so I couldn't turn up drunk. So somehow I would do it, and I'd be sick, but I'd taken enough to make it through. And this went on for a couple of years, and then I started feeling, it got so bad, my sister grabbed me, and she, after one of the drunks where someone had to find me, and she brought me in my mom's backyard, and she's screaming at me. And my little sister and I were real close, and she never yelled at me, and she's just screaming at me, this has got to stop. So I said, okay, I'll stop, and I moved out into this little basement apartment where I didn't have to hide. I could even put the beer in the fridge now, so I didn't have to hide it from my mom. So my drinking went on there, and one of my dreams is not to have that apartment. I wanted this other apartment that was down about a couple miles down the street, and it was over a bar, and it had a stairway that went right down into the bar, and I thought, boy, that'd be great, because I was always scared. I didn't like drinking and driving, because I didn't want to kill nobody. And then I wouldn't have to drive. I could come right down the stairs, go in the bar, get drunk, and even if I had to get somebody to carry me upstairs, that would be great. Well, I never got that apartment. I ended up staying at this apartment, and I kept driving and drinking. And eventually I did get a DUI, and went to, got locked up again. And at that time, they were just getting ready to get serious with this DUI business. And so I got off with a year's probation and a couple of $1,000 fine and classes and whatever. Nothing like what they're going through now. And at that time, everybody was, they about had it with me, after this DUI. And, by the way, at this, I had visiting rights with my kids. Half the time I would show up, and she wouldn't give me the kids, and I couldn't understand why. She is so mean. Well, I was drunk. You're not supposed to put 6 kids in the car drunk. It's a rule. I don't understand why, but, and it was her fault. So, where was I? Oh, yeah. So everybody was pretty much tired of this. So my mom would always hint about AA. I knew what AA was. She had tried it on my dad, 15, 20 years before. So I figured I got to do something. I don't want all these people, I don't want to listen to no more of her stuff. So one of her cousins, Miriam, she was a bit older than me. She came by and she gave me the book Living Sober. And I read it. And I went to a meeting with her fiance, and I walked into this meeting, and I swear to God, everybody was 95 years old. That's what they looked like to me, and I don't know what they said, but I went there and I smiled, and I have no idea what they said, but I kept going back for about 3 months to a meeting here and there, and it seemed to keep my mom happy and everybody else happy, and I didn't drink for 3 months, and the opportunity came where I could have a drink, and I drank, and it went back to the same old thing. I lasted 8 months, and then it was really bad. I even went to work once, so drunk I went 2 hours late, and I had a crew of about 25 men working for me, and nobody turned me in. I don't know why, but I ended up just sitting in my office and trying to sober up, and the men more or less put themselves to work, and I was really lucky there, because that I would have thrown away close to 25 years, or 20 years. But anyway, it got to the point where this one weekend, I think I had about a Thursday and a Friday off, taxed on the weekend. And I was pretty disgusted, and I figured I can't live like this no more. So why don't I die? I think I just want to die. But the method that I chose was I wanted to drink myself to death. I had heard of somebody doing that, alcohol poisoning or something, so I'll do that. At that time, my 16-year-old son had come live with me, and so I went out for these 4 days. I did a lot of bad things. I went back to the old neighborhood where the other kids were, and their mother, and went back to that bar, and I caused a whole lot of chaos. and don't know how I got home. And I woke up that morning, and I remember looking at the squares in the acoustical ceiling. And I don't know why, I'll never forget them squares and how sick I felt. Not only physically, but I just couldn't take it anymore. And I wanted to die. But I didn't have the guts, and this being drunk, ODing on booze didn't work. So, you know, and then I went in the bathroom and I looked in the mirror and I said, you are one miserable puke, you know, you just... So I remembered that this guy I knew at work was in AA. I had heard he was, and I called him. I called him at work, and I says, his name was Chuck, he's passed away now, and I says, Chuck, I'm in trouble, I need some help. And he started laughing. I said, what the hell is this guy laughing at? I'm dying here, you know. And he knew, you know, he was laughing with joy because he knew, I guess he knew deep down I had hit my bottom. It must have been in my voice. He came over,